Okay, welcome to the Birmingham Medical News podcast. I'm Steve Spencer, the founder of the Birmingham Medical News. We've been publishing a monthly newspaper for doctors and all types of healthcare providers in Alabama now for 21 years. We also send out a digital version as well. So today's podcast, we do this in conjunction in partnership with Kassouf & Company. Kassouf & Company is a 100-year-old accounting firm here in Birmingham. And for our purposes, Kassouf has a really high-quality health consulting practice. Today's podcast is sponsored by Thomas Stroud. Thomas Stroud is a healthcare banker with PNC. He's been, for over 20 years, he's been helping fund healthcare startups and acquisitions. In that time, he's secured millions in capital, helping to build, financial systems and practices. So, Thomas is here, and be glad for you to tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thanks, Steve. It's good to see you again, and get to sit with you. And the thing that kind of differentiates what we do at PNC is PNC has a healthcare specific department. So every day, all day long, all I do is work with healthcare providers, doctors, dentists, veterinarians. And so it gives me a little bit of an insight. This allows me to kind of marry all the backgrounds, healthcare, entrepreneurship, along with the financial aspect of things. And I tell people you can get a loan or you can get banking services from any bank, right? And so for those of a certain age, you remember the movie The Godfather.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so they had a character in there. His name was Tom Hagen.
I remember exactly.
And Tom Hagen was the consigliere. And that's kind of what I tell my clients and people that I talk with. I'm like your consigliere. So whether it's a startup like practice acquisition, if you're buying into a practice, or if you've been in a practice and you want to either talk about buying the property that you're leasing or you want to move into a build out, those are the things that I talk to my clients about. A lot of times it's a conversation with an advisor versus a conversation with a banker. It comes down to having someone that's going to tell you the truth about things and going to be an advisor and help you provide that strategy. And so that's kind of what I do, as opposed to just being a regular banker. I look at myself more as a healthcare practice consigliere.
Okay, so our guest today is Kimberly Darnell with Carr. Carr is actually the largest tenant buyer exclusive healthcare real estate firm in the country.
Correct.
So, Kimberly, first off, tell us a little bit about your niche. What exactly does a tenant rep do?
So as a buyer tenant rep, I only represent people that are looking for spaces to either lease or to purchase, or land as well. What that really means is that you will not see my name on a sign in any building. So I don't list properties, have great relationships with the listing agents that I work with, but that gives me the ability to have no bias to where I put my clients. So if I'm not biased where I'm putting them, I'm not trying to please any landlords. So I have a fiduciary to the buyer or the tenant that I'm working with and to them only.
Okay. And why did you choose to specialize in healthcare real estate?
Well, to be honest, it was just the opportunity that was presented to me. However, it was a great fit for me because my entire background has been in healthcare.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I started out as a clinical dietitian, and I did that for about 15 years. And then I had children. I stayed home a couple of years. And when I went back to work, I went back selling medication. So I worked for a pharmacy that did compounding medications. And so I was a representative for them. And I did that for about 5 years, and then insurance does what it does, and it quit paying for what I sold. So then I transitioned into being a rep for a dental lab. So I sold teeth for 5 years. And then I was presented with this opportunity, and I jumped at it.
Okay. When did you start with Carr?
About 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And let me ask you this. What's the biggest mistake you see healthcare providers making when it comes to finding a space or choosing a space?
I think one of the biggest problems that we see is that they will drive around and they'll try to find a space themselves.
Okay.
So when they do that and they start calling, people, the number that's on the sign, they start calling those listing agents. Those listing agents assume that they're not going to have representation. And so then they try to bring somebody in, and the listing agent is, well, I'm already working with them. Right? So, but the listing agent is representing the landlord. They're not representing the client. So the client ends up not having representation in a deal like that. So that, and then they just try to move too fast. We like to take them, what we call taking them to market, and we negotiate on multiple properties. And that gives us a lot more leverage when we do that, instead of just like finding one thing and let's just jump on it and go, because you just never know. I mean, you can get to where you've got, you're at lease, and then it goes away. Like the deal can fall apart, So you need to have a lot of options.
Okay. One thing you just made me think of is, so I'm just thinking for most physicians, there's a certain area of town that they may practice in, especially if are you taking many people who have been in practice for a while, or folks who are just starting practice for the first time?
Well, it just depends on what they're doing. I have just closed several deals. One of them was with a 60-some-odd-year-old lady who is finally going out on her own. So she's doing a startup at 60 years old. Okay. And so that's been interesting. So she's been practicing, but now she's doing her own thing.
And let me ask you real quick on that one. So, all right, does she want to stay in the area where she'd been practicing? Because I'm thinking she's already got a lot of patients from that area. Or does that matter?
Well, for her, no. She's in Tuscaloosa, but she is going to open up a practice here in Birmingham. And it happens to be rheumatology. And we are short on rheumatologists. So she has a ton of patients that come from Birmingham to see her, because it's so hard to get into a rheumatology clinic, especially in Birmingham. So she'll be bringing a lot of her patients with her, but she'll also, she has a great opportunity to really grow her own practice.
Okay, so location doesn't really matter, unless it maybe she wants something convenient for folks coming from Tuscaloosa, maybe something like that, or
maybe. But she knew exactly where she wanted to be. She wanted to be at a specific area in Hoover. It's not saturated with rheumatology, but it's very hard to find a space there. And so anyway, we ended up finding her, a perfect location. She just built a house about a mile and a half up the road. Perfect. So she's going to be super close to home now, and not driving,
walk to work if she just
50 minutes every day.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it really kind of varies, it sounds like.
It just varies. And if you have somebody who is wanting multiple locations, they may be, in Trussville. I've got a guy right now in Trussville, but he wants 10 locations all across Alabama. So we sat down yesterday and kind of brainstormed on where he wants to go for his second location.
So 9 more, wow. What did y'all figure out for him for his second location?
So we're definitely going to try to do something around the 31, 280 kind of corridor,
sure.
Around that area. He doesn't mind 31, but he really wants to be close to a hospital. Because a lot of those, if we can get him in a medical building, there will be a lot of camaraderie for him, because he's general practice with all the different people that are already in the building. Yeah.
So I'm assuming if he wants 10, maybe he wants you could almost do 5, I guess, within, an hour of Birmingham, thinking about north, going to Gardendale, down to Pelham, like that.
Yeah, that was on his list. Montgomery, maybe. Huntsville for sure.
Yeah.
So there's lots of room for him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, by the way, back earlier you mentioned going beyond listings. What does that look like?
So I have an example of a client right now who wants to be in Homewood, in the walkable area in Homewood. And so I don't know if you know much about Homewood, but there's nothing in Homewood available. I mean,
I'm not surprised at all. And I know that walkable area, it's a great place.
Yeah, it's a great place to be.
I'm not surprised there's nothing available.
Right. Yeah. And so I knew that already. I actually live in Homewood, so I knew that. And so I went ahead and did a search. Of course, nothing popped up in the area. So I just got in my car and I just started driving. And I found a location. I walked by and there was a sign, just a little for rent sign on a window. And I was like, oh my goodness, and so I called And the lady answered, and so we're working through a deal for that space right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's just, trying to go above and beyond, I guess. Another way that I work when I can't find something that I know that there's probably something available is I've just developed really good relationships with a lot of listing agents. So I just start making phone calls. And you wouldn't believe how many they're like, well, this isn't ever going to go on the market, but they do want to sell it if somebody comes to me, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Or there might be an opening coming here, or they'll let me know, like, hey, somebody's lease is ending here and it's going to end in June, so it'll be available then, if your client can wait a couple months, that kind of thing.
Obviously, good relationships to have. That obviously helps a lot.
Right.
So what about when you start with a new client? What's your process?
This is a great for you to ask me because I met with 2 people yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So the first thing that I do is I'll sit down with them and I just want to know, a little bit about them. First of all, I try to get to know people because I feel like this is more of a relationship business than it is anything because you have to really build a level of trust. If somebody's going to trust you with a multi-million-dollar deal, that's not my money. That's their money, So I try to develop a trust relationship with them. And then we will sit down and talk about, what are your plans? How many employees do you have? How much do you want to grow? So, for example, yesterday, that guy told me that he wants to do 10 locations. And that was a shocker.
The same guy
that was yesterday I met with him. So we are just starting our search. I sent him options yesterday afternoon after I met with him in the morning, sent him multiple options. So he's going to tell me what he wants to go see. So that's the next thing. I find out kind of where they want to be, and I'll go and I'll run a search for them.
Okay.
And I give them a list of all the things that are available in the area they want to be in, that's the right size, the right type of building, that kind of thing. And then I send it to them, and then they tell me which ones are their favorites.
Okay.
I'll say, send me your 5 favorites. And then after that, when they send me those, I'll set up a day and we'll go tour. So a lot of doctors are off on Wednesday afternoons or Friday afternoons, and so I'll set up a tour that works with their schedule, and we go out and we tour all the locations, and then we'll sit down and discuss what are the pros and cons of each of these, what did you like, what do you not like, can we make this work, and then I start negotiating, for them, and I negotiate on no less than 3 properties. I might have mentioned that earlier. I do that on purpose because it gives me more negotiation power because some, they might really, really love a space, but it might be more expensive. And if I can say, hey, I'll put him here, but I've got another great option over here, and it's $3 a square foot cheaper. Is there any way we can get closer to that number? Landlords really like medical tenants.
I can imagine.
Yeah, they like them because there's less than a 1% default rate on their loans. So they really like that. And usually they'll have like a pretty extensive build out. So they're going to be there for a long time.
Yeah.
If you put a dentist in a space, they're not moving in 5 years.
Oh, the chair and all the equipment.
All the water and everything, you know what I mean? So they're going to be there for long term. So usually I can get a 10-year term for them, which is good because that gives the landlord, peace of mind, and it gives your client like, oh, I'm not going to have to move, and then we get options put in there for them to renew, continue to renew their lease. But the longer, that we can get them in there, the better, just for the cost. The cost of everything is so expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I assume there's little nuances of what you have to look at in the contract, like who's paying for the utilities or how that works, and build out things like that.
Right.
I'm sure there must be a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, and landlords are getting stingier and stingier on their tenant improvement money that they give, and it's mainly just because after COVID, a lot of landlords lost a lot of money during COVID, and they had given these people hundreds of thousands of dollars for build out, and then they're just gone, and they're never getting that money back. So really trying to get the most that you can get out of them, and if you give them a longer term, they'll usually give you more money.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They'll give you more money, and then it also helps the client because it gives them longer to pay it back. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So. So it's a definitely one of the nuances is trying to figure figure that out, the term, the money. And then again, like you just said, triple nets, which is, water, power, and all that. Who's going to pay all that? Is this a full service lease? Are they going to, what's going to be taken care of? Who's going to pay for the roof when it leaks? Like all those things are just really, really important.
Yeah.
When you're negotiating that deal, you try to get caps on that stuff. So, because if somebody's building out of space, they still don't own it. They might put $500,000 in it.
Yeah.
But they don't own it, so they don't need to replace the heating and air. You know what I mean? There's just stuff like that that's just.
Now, you just made me think of something. Have you yet ever had a client who's been renting for a while, now they're ready to find a space to buy? Do you ever deal with that?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
I don't have anybody currently,
right, but that's something that could come up, and that's all. I guess when you're looking at buying, that's a whole different.
Yeah, that's a whole different set of rules and regulations and everything else that goes along with that. I do have a girl that I'm looking for land for right now because she does want to do a ground up.
Okay.
So that'll be a great opportunity for her. It's in a location where everybody wants to be. Okay. And so we're just having to be patient.
Okay.
So you just have to be patient and wait. And when I find something new, I call her every time. I'm like, hey, what about this? What do you think about this? And we'll go take a peek, So we think we might have something, but it's going to be a little bit because they're doing a new development where she wants to be. So we think we can get her part of that. So yeah.
And let me ask you, is there a deal that in your experience that really tested you?
I would say this rheumatology office that I just did. It was a tricky one.
Okay.
For example, we were going into, like I said, it was a very saturated area. It was hard to find a spot. There was a little bitty empty space that was only 1,200 square feet, and it's just a gray shell. It has not been built out. And next door was a 24 square foot dentist office. Okay. So it had been built out. It had been empty, though, for about a year and a half or maybe 2 years. The dentist that built it out, very expensive, like, $900,000 build out with equipment and everything else. After 2 years, went bankrupt.
Oh, man. So the equipment's all
it was all still there, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's ideal if you can find a dentist to go in that space.
Yeah.
But my rheumatologist wanted that space because it was the perfect location for her, and she wanted the one next door. She wanted both of them.
Both spaces.
Yeah, she wanted both spaces.
Okay.
So it ended up working out, but it was a little difficult. It was tricky because of the bankruptcy. Everything that was in there was owned by a particular bank. They were taking their time. They were making it very difficult. It's like, we need to get this stuff out of here, but they still own it, so we couldn't touch it, So fortunately, with the connections that I have, I was able to find a buyer for the equipment, a dental group, to buy the equipment. So they came in.
That's pretty good because that's pretty smart because I see your problem. The bank owns equipment; they're not in a hurry. And then you just did you basically did the bank's job for them. You went and found somebody to buy the equipment.
Yeah. So
I'm sure the bank probably wasn't even looking for anybody, were they? They were probably
it wasn't on their radar because it's just been sitting there.
And they've got a bunch of other things to deal with, so they're not even thinking about who do we find to buy this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that ended up working out. They bought it. They came in. They have to have professionals come in and take all that stuff out. You can't just rip it out or then it won't be usable, and it's all very expensive. I think one of those chairs is like $7,500, so they had to be really careful. So anyway, they were professionals. They came in, they took everything, out of it and fresh slate for her, and they're doing their build out right now.
All right. That sounds like a good one. How important do you think location is for a practice?
Well, so it just kind of depends on what type of practice it is.
Okay.
So I would say if you're not a walk-in, if you're a referral, clinic, then it's maybe not as important because you're going to be getting all those referrals from other doctors, like, for example, the rheumatologist. She knew exactly where she wanted to be. However, she could have gone basically anywhere and been fine. You know what I mean? Because she's a referral. People aren't just walking in, there. But, if it's like an urgent care, you want it to be in a really great location. So I just
accessible
accessible, walkable, if possible. I just put a pediatric urgent care down at Lee Branch, down 280.
That's near where I go there all the time.
Yeah. And so she'll be opening in June. You know what I mean? It can be just a walk in. You don't have to have an appointment because it's an urgent care.
Yeah.
So, and there are other things like a lot of dentists like to be on the corner of like Main and Main. Because they want their sign to be up and they want people to see them, because if they just, they're not being referred, people are going to see their sign and say, oh, I need to go to the dentist, And so it just kind of depends on what type of practice is. An endodontist doesn't need to be on Main and Main.
Right.
They can be in a professional office building or something like that.
And let me ask you this. What kind of trends are you seeing in healthcare real estate right now?
A lot of people are wanting to be in retail. Yeah, in retail spaces, So, for example, that urgent care, she was very specific. She wanted to be in a public shopping center.
Okay.
So, so that's what we found. We found one in a public shopping center for her. So, and then again, the rheumatologist, that is a retail center as well.
Oh,
where she's going to be.
And she doesn't have to be, as you
doesn't
mentioned
have to be,
earlier.
but she really wanted to be.
Okay.
Yeah, in retail. So a lot of people are wanting to go retail. We are seeing that landlords are being a lot more aggressive with their TI for office buildings, office space. They're realizing that these are long-term tenants here, so this is worth this investment. So we are seeing a trend now to where a lot of our agents are getting calls from landlords for office space saying, hey, we would love to get some medical in here, and in other states, they're trying to change whole office buildings into medical buildings.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So they're getting as many medical people in there as they can and to make it more of a medical complex than just a standard office building.
And another thing I wonder about, why should a healthcare provider bring in somebody like you?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but I would say the number one reason would be to save them money, right? So first thing that we're going to do is save them time, and time is money for them. So when they're out driving around, calling all these people, they're wasting time. They are trained to be a doctor. Let me do all of that. That's what I do. You know what I mean? So I can save them so much time. I can let them know everything that's available in the market in a very short amount of time, and then we'll set it up, and then they just get to choose the ones out of those that they like. I mean, I can get floor plans, I can get pictures, I can have everything before they ever even see the space if they want to.
So you're really saving them a lot of time and stress.
Yes.
Basically,
yes, absolutely. Stress. Money is huge. They don't know what to negotiate on. If they're trying to do it themselves, they don't know that they can get a lower rent rate. Or, maybe they want to do a 10-year deal. I have an example of a vet that I did. 10-year deal. They were a startup. It's two vets. They're married. And they could not get their loan at the rent rate that they were asking. Right, because the rent rate was too high. And so I was able to create a plan for them that the landlord agreed to, because he wanted to make a certain amount of money at the end. And I was like, okay, well, we can make you that same amount of money, but can you give us 2 years at this rate with no escalations, and then we'll just escalate it a little higher, a little faster than we would on the back end, because they're going to need a good 2 years to get, up and running and making money, and they're not even going to notice that escalation, of their rent rate going up, at that point.
Once the practice is busy. Yeah.
But it was working with the bank, so I have really good relationships with the bank. So working with the banker, okay, what does it need to be? Okay, well, let me see if I can do this, and then I can create that plan for them and present that to the landlord. He approved it, and so they were able to go ahead and get it, because you can't do a $750,000 build out without a loan. You got to have it. So having somebody that's willing to work like that for you to make sure that all the pieces are going to fit together, I think is really important.
And let me ask you this, what kind of advice would you give to a provider who's just opening their first location?
I would say find help. Yeah. That's the first thing they need to do. They need to find somebody to walk them through it. They need to find somebody who has great relationships with vendors. That's what we call all of our partners. For example, bankers and accountants and real estate attorneys, all the way down to who's going to put your sign on the outside of your building? Who is going to who are you going to get your scrubs from? Who's going to put the logo on them? Who, even down to those little bitty things. If you have somebody that's more of considered like, I consider myself more of like a full service agent because I have so many connections and I can help them with just about anything that comes up. Usually if it's a startup, I'll go through like all of my people. I'll have 12 people that I'm going to introduce them to. But I'm going to do it strategically. I'm not going to just say, I'm going to, here's all these people and I'm going to introduce you to them right now. I'm going to wait. You don't need the security guy yet, to put in your security system. But you're going to need him once we get the contractor, and the architect and all that. So just having somebody who is willing to kind of go above and beyond, I feel like is really important and has really good connections with people that they trust. So, and if they trust me, they're going to trust the people that I trust.
And I assume that working with purely with healthcare folks is fairly different than other kind of general commercial real estate agents.
Well, I would think so, yeah. I've actually had a general commercial agent tell me the next medical deal I get, I'm going to let you get it. I'm going to let you have it.
Oh.
Because she just doesn't understand it. There's just different nuances and dynamics and things that we get to negotiate more aggressively than, and you can tell if you're working with somebody that just does office space. When you ask for certain things, they look at you like you're crazy and you're like, well, this is standard in medical. So, you know what I mean? It's kind of knowing the differences and maybe we're a little more aggressive on our TI ask because we need a lot more. It takes a lot more to build out a medical office that has to have sinks in every room, than it does just to put a bunch of cubicles in there, or just put up walls, so that people can have, single offices. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. It does. And as we're kind of getting near our end, where do you see the commercial healthcare real estate business and the industry itself going in the next 5 or 10 years?
That's a great question. The one benefit about being healthcare specific is that it doesn't matter what the economy is doing. Healthcare providers have to have a place to practice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They absolutely have to have a place to practice.
Yeah.
And so about 15% of medicine is telehealth, and that's it. Everybody else has to have a place to go. So, and if they're already there, they need somebody to help them renew. So that's another, portion of our business that is actually a large portion of our business is finding people that are about to renew their lease and helping them with that. Because if you've been in a space for 10 years, you've probably, your rent rate's probably too high because you're going to have an escalation every single year, right? Okay. Probably 3%. So after 10 years, 3% escalation year upon year upon year, it's cumulative.
It's a lot.
It's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
And so if you, look at that, they're probably out of market, and so we work to get them back down to market,
I would assume that'd be a little hard because I'm thinking that the property owner's not going to want to go backwards. Is that difficult?
Well, I mean, maybe, unless we just move them.
Yeah.
We'll move them. Yeah. I can move them because somebody else that, I can put them in a brand new space for less than what you're paying here. You know what I mean? Like, there's ways to negotiate that.
Okay.
We had a guy in New Jersey, one of our agents. It was a large medical building that he did a renewal for. He saved them $1.8 million on their renewal. Wow. They were so far out of market, and he got them all the way back down. Their rent was actually lower than what they started at 10 years ago.
So I guess obviously if somebody has like a 3% annual escalation and the real estate market, the prices aren't
they're not escalating as quickly.
Yeah, that's where you get in.
Yeah, that's where you can find that. And then getting them, if you've been in an office space and you go, God, this needs painting or this needs carpet or whatever, they've probably been in there a while.
Yeah.
So we go in and try to help them, get the landlord, hey, they've been here for, however many years. They need some flooring, they need some paint, like we need a refresh in here, trying to get that for them. Just stuff like that. And then maybe even some free rent in there.
Okay.
So, I mean, how nice is that after 10 years to have 3 or 4 months of just not having to pay rent?
Right. Those are some good. That would all help a lot.
Right.
Well, before we go, is there anything that we haven't touched on that we should?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is if you are looking or considering a new space, even if it's land and you want to build, make sure that you start early. The earlier, the better. So bring in an agent as quickly as you can. Because if you start looking and you start making phone calls, people are hesitant to work. They think they're just going to work with you. And they don't think you're going to have representation. And sometimes it's harder to bring us in. But also, oftentimes things take longer than you think they're going to take. If somebody's buying land to build, that's about an 18-month to 2-year process. So you're not going to be in there in 6 months, So, and then also, if you're going to renew your lease, to give us leverage, we need to have the ability to move you if we need to. And so I need to take them to market. I need to find a couple of locations that would work for them that gives me leverage to go back to that landlord and say, hey, we found some other options in the market. How bad do you want them to stay? That kind of thing. But that takes several months. You need about a 6 to 12 month window to try to find those spaces and then go and then come back to the landlord, and all of that. So just the quicker you can bring, an agent in, the better.
Okay. Well, Kimberly, we really appreciate you coming in. I think this is interesting and good information, especially for providers that are either starting a practice or, much as you mentioned, somebody who may have been in a location 10 or more years.
Right. Yeah. We've got ways to help everybody.
Okay. Well, thanks again. It's great information.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ask the Doctor podcast, brought to you by the Birmingham Medical News and Kassouf & Company. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to tune in for our next installment. I'm Steve Spencer, and wish you and your loved ones a healthy journey until we see each other again.